The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the drought-parched plains surrounding the Mitchell Ranch, where Clara Mitchell stood on her wraparound porch watching dust devils dance across the empty cattle yards. 6 months had passed since her husband's mysterious death, and the vast spreads of Arizona territory that had once teemed with prime beef now lay eerily quiet. She twisted the gold band on her finger, a habit that had grown more frequent as her troubles mounted. Running a 50,000-acre cattle operation alone wasn't what Clara had envisioned when she'd married Thomas Mitchell 5 years ago. But here she was, 30 years old and fighting to keep the ranch while strange accidents plagued her operation. Cut fences, scattered herds, and most recently, 3 dead ranch hands found in a gulch with bullets in their backs. The local law in Prescott seemed suspiciously uninterested in investigating. Sheriff Noah Turner's casual dismissal of the murders still burned in Clara's mind. Probably just drifters causing trouble, Mrs. Mitchell. Nothing for a lady to concern herself with. His condescending smile had matched Alexander Phillips when her late husband's business partner suggested she sell the ranch to him before things get worse. Both men clearly thought a woman had no business running the largest spread in the territory. The crunch of hooves on gravel drew Clara's attention to a lone rider approaching through the golden haze. She recognized Benjamin Roberts, her foreman, by his distinctive slouched posture in the saddle. The normally unflappable man looked agitated as he dismounted, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. "Ma'am, we found 2 more dead cows out by Eagle Creek. Clean shots to the head, just like the others." Clara's jaw tightened as she processed this latest assault on her livelihood. "That's 15 head this month alone. This isn't random rustling anymore, Ben. Someone's trying to break us." She didn't voice her growing suspicion that Alexander Phillips was behind it all. The man had been pushing to buy her water rights since before Thomas died, claiming the railroad coming through would make them worth a fortune. Inside her study, Clara pulled out the leather ledger where she tracked the ranch's finances. The numbers told a grim story. Between the dead cattle, lost contracts, and having to hire extra hands to patrol the property, her resources were stretched dangerously thin. But she'd grown up watching her father build this operation from nothing. Mitchell Land had some of the territory's most reliable water sources, and she'd die before letting Phillips get his hands on them. A knock at the door revealed Helen Turner, the sheriff's wife and one of the few people Clara still trusted in Prescott. Helen's face was drawn with worry as she settled into a chair. "I overheard something at the Mercantile today. Alexander Phillips was meeting with some rough-looking men behind the store. I couldn't hear much, but they mentioned your name and something about increasing the pressure." Clara's hands clenched into fists. "That snake. He's hiring outlaws to destroy my operation while your husband looks the other way." She stood abruptly, mind racing. "Helen, I need you to send a telegram to my cousin Frances in Globe. She knows people, the kind who are good with guns and willing to work quietly. It's time to even the odds." The next morning, Clara rode into Prescott to meet with Jacob Perez, her banker. The Mexican-American businessman had been one of Thomas's closest friends and remained loyal to Clara despite mounting pressure from Phillips's allies on the bank's board. "I can extend your note another 6 months, Jacob said after reviewing her books. "But be careful, Clara. Phillips has been gathering powerful friends. Even Judge Whitaker was seen dining at his house last week." As Clara left the bank, she spotted Sheriff Turner deep in conversation with Phillips outside the saloon. The businessman's eyes met hers with cold calculation, and she lifted her chin defiantly as she passed. Let him scheme. She had plans of her own now. Her telegram to Frances had already been answered. Help was coming. Soon, Phillips would learn that Clara Mitchell was neither helpless nor alone. Back at the ranch, Clara gathered her remaining hands to reorganize their defenses. Benjamin Roberts had served in the Union cavalry, and his military experience proved invaluable in planning patrol routes and fortifying vulnerable points. But they needed more than just defensive measures now. They needed people who could match Phillips' hired guns and gather evidence of his crimes. That evening, as Clara watched the sun sink behind distant mesas, she thought of Thomas. Had he discovered Phillips' true nature before his accident? She'd found papers in his desk suggesting he'd been investigating irregularities in their shared business ventures. Now, those papers were locked in her safe, along with other documents that hinted at a web of corruption reaching from the sheriff's office to the territorial capital. The distant thunder of hooves drew Clara's attention from the papers scattered across her desk. Through the window, she spotted a cloud of dust approaching from the east, not the direction Phillips's men usually came from. Benjamin appeared at her door moments later, rifle in hand, but she raised a hand to calm him. "That'll be Francis's people," she said, though she kept her own revolver close as she stepped onto the wraparound porch. 3 riders emerged from the dust, leading 2 pack horses loaded with supplies. Clara studied them carefully as they approached. The woman in front sat her horse like she'd been born in the saddle, her dark hair tied back beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Behind her rode a weathered man with graying temples and a younger fellow whose clean-shaven face belied the well-worn pistol at his hip. "Clara Mitchell?" the woman called out as they drew near. At Clara's nod, she swung down from her mount with fluid grace. "I'm Helen Winters. Francis sent us. This is Alexander Drake and Noah Collins." The men touched their hat brims in greeting, but remained mounted, their eyes scanning the surrounding terrain with professional wariness. Benjamin stepped forward to take the horses as Clara led Helen inside. The woman's boots clicked against the hardwood floors as she followed Clara into the study. "Francis told me some, but I need to hear it all from you," Helen said, settling into a chair. "Every detail about Phillips, the rustling, and your husband's death. Can't hunt a snake properly until you know it's whole." Over coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe, Clara laid out the whole bitter tale. The mysterious accident that had killed Thomas 6 months ago. The steadily increasing pressure from Phillips to sell the ranch. The rustling that always seemed to target her most valuable stock. The sheriff's continued insistence that he could find no evidence of organized theft, despite clear tracks leading to Phillips' land. Phillips has the law in his pocket, Clara concluded, but he's not content with just stealing cattle anymore. He wants the water rights that come with this land, rights that control half the grazing in the territory. With those, he could squeeze every independent rancher from here to Prescott. Helen's expression remained neutral, but her eyes had grown hard as gunmetal. "Francis mentioned something about papers your husband left. Documentation that might prove Phillips' schemes?" Clara crossed to the safe hidden behind a landscape painting. "Thomas was no fool. He kept records of everything. Shipping manifests showing cattle, Phillips claimed to have bought being moved before the purchase dates, bank drafts with suspicious routing, letters hinting at bribes paid to officials in Globe." The sound of horses in the yard interrupted them. Benjamin's voice called out a warning. Riders approaching from the west this time. Helen moved to the window with the silent grace of a hunting cat. 3 men, she reported, moving like they own the place. Her hand rested casually near her hip. "Phillips's weekly social call," Clara said with quiet venom. "He'll have come to make another offer for the ranch, one I'm supposed to be too desperate to refuse by now." She straightened her spine, smoothed her skirts. "Time you and your people got a look at the snake himself." Helen nodded, a slight smile touching her lips. "Good? First rule of any hunt. Observe your prey in its natural habitat. Alexander and Noah will fade back. Watch how Phillips' men deploy themselves. Meanwhile, you and I can see how he reacts to finding you've got new friends." She adjusted her gun belt casually. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones wearing civilized smiles. As hoofbeats drew nearer, Clara felt a fierce satisfaction. Phillips thought her alone and vulnerable, ready to be devoured by his schemes. But he was about to discover that this widow had teeth of her own, and allies who knew how to use them. The game was changing, and Phillips didn't even know he'd already lost the advantage of surprise. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard as a fine black carriage pulled by matched bay horses rolled to a stop. Clara watched from the porch as Thaddeus Phillips, immaculate in his Eastern suit, stepped down. His carefully groomed appearance seemed almost artificial against the rugged backdrop of working ranch buildings and windswept plains. 2 riders flanked the carriage, their expressions carefully neutral but their eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. Helen had positioned herself casually near the water trough, appearing to all the world like nothing more than a ranch hand taking a break. But Clara noted how the gunslinger's stance allowed quick access to her holstered weapon while maintaining clear sightlines to Phillips' men. Somewhere out of sight, Alexander and Noah were surely noting every detail of the visitor's arrival. "My dear Mrs. Blackwood," Phillips called out, removing his derby hat with practiced grace. "I trust you've had time to reconsider our previous discussion. These trying times call for practical solutions, wouldn't you agree?" His smile never reached his eyes, which remained cold and calculating as they took in Helen's presence. The morning sun cast long shadows across Anna Mitchell's ranch as she watched her newly hired gunmen patrol the fence line. Something about Alexander Turner, the tall, silver-haired marshal from Prescott, made her uneasy despite his impeccable reputation. He'd arrived too quickly after her cattle started disappearing, almost as if he'd been waiting for trouble to start. Benjamin Roberts, the youngest of her hired guns, rode up with dust coating his denim jacket. "Ma'am, we found more cut fence on the north side. Whoever's doing this knows exactly where to hit us." His eyes darted nervously toward the marshal's distant figure. Anna had noticed the young man's growing suspicion of Turner's convenient timing. Helen Perez, Anna's foreman and closest friend since childhood, emerged from the barn leading her paint horse. The hands spotted 3 of Judge Phillips' men watching the south pasture again. "That old vulture's been mighty interested in your water rights since Thomas passed." Helen's words confirmed Anna's fears about her late husband's former business partner. The cattle losses had started small, just a few head here and there that could be explained away as strays. But within weeks of Thomas Mitchell's death, entire herds began vanishing overnight. The local sheriff and Globe seemed surprisingly uninterested in investigating, despite Anna's repeated requests for help. Noah Phillips, the judge's son, had been making increasingly aggressive offers to buy the ranch, always ending with thinly veiled threats about a widow's inability to manage such vast holdings alone. Anna recalled Thomas's warnings about never trusting the Phillips family, though he'd never explained why before his suspicious fall from horseback 6 months ago. Marshal Turner gathered his deputies near the main house, their hushed conversations carrying an air of conspiracy that set Anna's instincts on high alert. She'd caught fragments of whispered words about tonight and North Canyon, but they grew silent whenever she approached. Something wasn't adding up about these lawmen. Jacob Perez, Helen's brother and the ranch's head wrangler, reported strange lights in the distance after sunset, patterns that seemed like signals. He'd tracked them to an abandoned line shack near where the fence cuts always appeared, but the marshal had ordered him to stay away, claiming it was under investigation. Clara Turner, the marshal's wife who'd arrived unexpectedly from Flagstaff, spent hours in town speaking with Judge Phillips. Anna had Frances Roberts, Benjamin's sister, and the local telegraph operator monitoring their communications. The encrypted messages between Phillips and someone in Yuma raised even more red flags. As dusk approached, Anna noticed her hired guns taking positions that seemed more about watching the marshal's men than protecting against rustlers. Benjamin had quietly organized the loyal hands into rotating patrols, while Helen kept detailed records of every suspicious movement around the ranch. The pieces were starting to form a disturbing picture. Judge Phillips had been Thomas's partner in several failed mining ventures, with massive debts that could be erased by gaining control of the Mitchell water rights. The same rights that Thomas had refused to sell just days before his fatal accident. Alice Roberts, Benjamin's mother and the town's retiring schoolteacher, brought Anna ledgers from the county records. They revealed a pattern of ranches falling to Phillips through suspicious deaths and forced sales, always with the same marshal's name appearing in the investigations. The corruption ran deeper than anyone had suspected. The sound of approaching horses drew Anna's attention, as several of Judge Phillips' men rode openly onto her land, led by his son Noah. Behind them, Marshal Turner and his deputies emerged from different directions, effectively surrounding the main house. The trap was closing, but Anna Mitchell had prepared for this moment. Helen's signal fire blazed to life on a distant ridge, answered by similar flames across the valley. Benjamin's carefully positioned men emerged from hiding, while Jacob's ranch hands moved to protect the vital water station. Anna Mitchell allowed herself a grim smile. The real battle for her land was about to begin, and she had no intention of becoming another of Judge Phillips's victims. Noah Phillips pulled his horse to a stop 50 yards from the main house, his cocky sneer visible even at that distance. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard as Anna stepped onto her porch, shotgun held casually but ready. Behind her, Benjamin and Jacob positioned themselves at strategic points, their presence a clear message that she wasn't standing alone. "Mrs. Mitchell," Marshal Turner called out, his voice carrying false authority, "we have warrants concerning water rights violations and cattle theft. I'm afraid you'll need to come with us to Prescott." The fabricated charges weren't surprising. It was the same pattern they'd used before. But this time, their targets were ready. A sudden commotion from the western pasture drew everyone's attention as a group of riders approached at full gallop. Alexander led the charge, bringing news that would shatter the marshal's carefully constructed plan. "Got the telegram from Globe," he shouted. "Federal investigators are on their way. Seems someone sent them quite a collection of evidence about certain irregularities in local law enforcement." Francis emerged from the barn, rifle trained steadily on Noah Phillips, as Helen and Clara took up positions near the corrals. The judge's son's expression darkened as he realized they were now surrounded by Anna's defenders. The tables had turned, but the tension crackled dangerously in the air. These were desperate men with everything to lose. "Your father's scheme ends here," Anna declared, her voice carrying across the yard. "We have proof of every fraudulent deal, every corrupted investigation, every rancher who mysteriously died after refusing to sell. The federal marshals will be very interested in how you and Turner managed to acquire so much land so quickly." The corrupt marshal's hand twitched toward his gun, but Jacob's warning shot kicked up dust inches from his horse's hooves. "I wouldn't," the rancher drawled. "My aim gets a lot better when I'm actually trying to hit something." Several of Turner's deputies began slowly backing their horses away, clearly reconsidering their loyalties. Alice appeared from the house with a stack of documents, ledgers, deeds, and witness statements that Helen had helped gather from across 3 counties. The evidence was damning, and Noah Phillips knew it. His father's carefully constructed empire was about to crumble, taking the corrupt officials and hired guns down with it. "You think these papers will matter?" Noah snarled, his composure cracking. "My father owns every judge between here and Yuma. You're nothing but a woman trying to play at running a ranch. By the time we're done, you'll be begging to sell." His threat carried the desperate edge of a man watching his future dissolve. Benjamin stepped forward, his quiet voice carrying surprising weight. "Those judges might reconsider their loyalties when they see copies of these documents arriving at newspaper offices across the territory. Imagine the scandal. Prominent citizens conspiring to steal land through murder and corruption. Hard to keep power when everyone knows your secrets." The standoff stretched taut as a wire, neither side willing to make the first move. In the distance, dust clouds marked the approach of more riders. Helen's signal fires had brought reinforcements from neighboring ranches. Others who'd suffered under Phillips's schemes were coming to stand with Anna. Turner's deputies continued to drift away, leaving the marshal increasingly isolated. Noah Phillips' face twisted with rage as he realized their advantage was slipping away. His hand dropped to his gun, but before he could draw, multiple rifles trained on him from every direction. The odds had shifted decisively. "Leave my land," Anna commanded, her voice steel-wrapped in silk. "The federal marshals will handle this now. Your father's empire is finished, built on blood and lies, and that foundation's about to crumble." She stepped forward, every inch the rancher her husband had believed she could be. "I suggest you ride back to Prescott while you still can. Your days of stealing land are over." The tension broke as Turner wheeled his horse around, no longer willing to die for Judge Phillips' schemes. Noah remained a moment longer, hatred burning in his eyes, before spurring his mount to follow. Their remaining men scattered, leaving only churned dust and the promise of justice to come. As the riders disappeared into the distance, Anna felt the weight of the moment settle. The immediate danger had passed, but the real fight was just beginning. With federal investigators coming and evidence in hand, they could finally expose the corruption that had plagued the territory. Her ranch was safe, and soon other victims of Phillips' greed would find justice as well. The autumn wind carried a bitter chill as Anna gathered her allies in the ranch house's main room that evening. The weathered oak table bore the weight of documents and ledgers. Evidence of Phillips' decades of corruption spread before them, like a dark tapestry of greed. Benjamin, the seasoned tracker who'd helped expose the judge's schemes, traced his finger along a map of water rights claims that sprawled across 3 territories. "These dates don't align with the official records," he muttered, comparing the documents to a stack of territorial filings. Phillips backdated permits, transferred water rights through shell companies. The whole system's rigged from Flagstaff to Globe. The lamplight cast long shadows across his face as he shook his head in disgust. Francis, who'd spent weeks infiltrating Phillips's operation as a clerk in his Prescott office, sorted through bank drafts and property deeds with methodical precision. Her experience as a former Treasury agent proved invaluable as she uncovered the complex web of financial fraud. "He's been laundering money through legitimate businesses," using the courts to seize land, then transferring assets through a maze of shell corporations. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Anna Mitchell stood on her front porch, watching the dust cloud approach from the east. Her hired guns had positioned themselves strategically around the ranch house, their rifles glinting in the harsh light. Benjamin Turner, the seasoned scout she'd brought on first, had warned her this confrontation was coming. Sheriff Alexander Phillips would arrive with his corrupt deputies, backing Jacob Roberts' fraudulent claim to her water rights. The past week had revealed the terrible truth. Roberts had been systematically undermining her position as owner of the Double M Ranch since her husband's death. His influence over local law enforcement in Prescott had allowed him to terrorize smaller ranchers into selling their holdings while maintaining a veneer of respectability. But Anna had proof now. Documents Helen Perez had discovered in the county records office showing Roberts had bribed officials and forged signatures. Frances Turner, Benjamin's sister and the ranch's bookkeeper, had pieced together the financial trail showing how Roberts funneled money through the sheriff's office. The evidence was damning, but Anna knew that wouldn't stop Phillips from trying to enforce Roberts' illegal claims. She'd seen too many honest ranchers driven off their land by similar schemes. This time would be different. She had assembled a team willing to stand against the corruption. Clara Roberts, Jacob's estranged daughter, had been instrumental in exposing her father's criminal enterprise. Working as a telegraph operator in Globe, she'd intercepted messages revealing the full scope of his operation. Dozens of ranches seized through intimidation and violence, their owners stripped of their rightful claims. The water rights were just the beginning. Roberts planned to control the entire territory's cattle industry through his network of crooked lawmen. The approaching riders materialized through the heat waves rising off the plains. Sheriff Phillips led the column, his badge catching the sun like a signal mirror. Behind him rode Noah Turner, Benjamin's younger brother who'd infiltrated the sheriff's office months ago to gather intelligence. His presence among Phillips's deputies had been crucial to staying one step ahead of Roberts' schemes. Now he would have to choose sides publicly. Anna felt the weight of her father's revolver against her hip as she descended the porch steps. The weapon was a reminder of everything she'd fought to protect since inheriting the ranch. Her late husband Ethan had understood the importance of the water rights, how they represented not just prosperity but independence from men like Roberts, who would use any means to expand their power. She wouldn't dishonor Ethan's memory by surrendering without a fight. "Mrs. Mitchell," Phillips called out as the riders approached the fence line. "We have a warrant to seize this property on behalf of Mr. Roberts. Your marriage contract clearly states all holdings transfer to your husband's business partner in the event of your refusal to honor standing agreements." The sheriff's voice carried across the yard, but Anna could hear the uncertainty beneath his bluster. He knew the documents were forged. Benjamin and his men had positioned themselves behind the water troughs and corral fencing, rifles trained on the approaching party. Frances stood at Anna's shoulder, papers in hand proving Roberts had falsified the marriage contract. Helen watched from the kitchen window, ready to signal the ranch hands waiting in the barn. The trap was set. They just needed Phillips to make the first move. Those agreements were obtained through fraud and coercion. Anna projected her voice clearly across the yard. "We have proof of systematic corruption in your office, Sheriff. Proof that's already been sent to the territorial governor." She saw Noah shift in his saddle, hand moving imperceptibly toward his holster. The other deputies exchanged nervous glances, their loyalty to Phillips wavering. The tension stretched like a rope about to snap. Then Roberts himself appeared, riding hard from the direction of Prescott. His face was twisted with rage as he saw his daughter Clara standing defiantly beside Anna. "You'll regret crossing me," he snarled, drawing his pistol. But before he could aim, Noah's revolver barked twice. Roberts toppled from his saddle as the deputies scattered, leaving Phillips alone and exposed. What followed was chaos, but controlled chaos, carefully orchestrated by Benjamin's planning. The corrupt deputies who tried to fight were quickly disarmed by Noah and the ranch hands emerging from the barn. Phillips threw down his badge, his authority evaporating as his benefactor bled into the dust. Clara knelt beside her father, not to comfort, but to recover the ledger he always carried, the final piece of evidence detailing his criminal empire. In the aftermath, as territorial marshals arrived to arrest Phillips and his conspirators, Anna reflected on how close she'd come to losing everything. But the unlikely alliance she'd forged, a former scout, his siblings, a telegraph operator turning against her father, and honest lawmen willing to risk their lives to fight corruption, had proven stronger than Robert's network of greed and intimidation. The water would continue flowing freely, nurturing not just the land, but the hope for justice in a territory still finding its way toward civilization. As the dust settled over the ranch, Anna found herself facing the daunting task of rebuilding. The territorial marshals had departed with their prisoners, but the echoes of the shootout still resonated through the valley. Benjamin's careful planning had saved lives, yet the cost of victory remained etched in broken fences, scattered cattle, and the haunting memory of how close they'd come to losing everything. Noah and Helen worked tirelessly to restore order among the ranch hands, many of whom had witnessed their fellow workers turn against them during Robert's uprising. Trust would take time to rebuild, but the siblings' steady presence provided stability. Helen's medical knowledge proved invaluable as she tended to those who'd sustained injuries during the conflict, her gentle hands healing both physical and emotional wounds. In Prescott, Clara testified before the territorial judge, presenting the damning evidence from her father's ledger. The documentation revealed a web of corruption stretching from Flagstaff to Yuma, implicating numerous officials who had profited from Robert's schemes. As each name was read aloud, the courtroom grew heavy with the weight of betrayal, but Clara's unwavering voice never faltered. Francis, the telegraph operator who had risked everything to warn them, received an unexpected offer from the territorial governor's office. Her intimate knowledge of Robert's communication networks made her invaluable in the ongoing investigation. She accepted the position, determined to use her skills to prevent similar conspiracies from taking root in other territories. Alexander, though cleared of all charges, chose to resign his badge. The corruption he'd witnessed had left deep scars, but Anna saw in him a different kind of strength. She offered him a position as her ranch foreman, recognizing that his commitment to justice would serve well in rebuilding the community's trust. After careful consideration, he accepted, understanding that sometimes the best way to uphold the law was to work outside its formal boundaries. The water rights that had sparked the conflict became a symbol of hope. Anna established a council with neighboring ranchers, creating a fair system for sharing the precious resource. Benjamin's diplomatic skills proved essential in these negotiations, as former rivals learned to work together for the common good. The meetings, held in the newly restored main house, gradually transformed from tense confrontations into collaborative planning sessions. Jacob's expertise in tracking helped recover most of the scattered cattle, but the process revealed something unexpected. Some of the stolen herds had been driven north toward unknown territories, suggesting that Robert's network extended beyond their initial assumptions. This discovery led to a new challenge, determining whether to pursue these leads or focus on securing what they had already reclaimed. As autumn approached, bringing cooler winds across the plains, Anna received word from Globe about similar water rights disputes emerging there. The territorial governor requested her guidance in resolving the conflict, recognizing that her experience could prevent another cycle of violence. She agreed to help, but not before ensuring her own ranch was secure. Ethan's nightmares about the shootout gradually subsided, replaced by dreams of future possibilities. His relationship with Alice deepened as they worked side by side, her knowledge of ranch operations complementing his strategic mind. Together, they began developing new methods for protecting the herds, incorporating lessons learned from their recent ordeal. The ranch itself seemed to heal alongside its people. New grass grew where horses' hooves had torn the earth, and rebuilt fences stood straighter than before. The bunkhouse, once divided between loyal hands and traitors, now housed a unified crew dedicated to protecting what they'd fought to preserve. Evening gatherings around the cook fire became opportunities for sharing stories, building bonds stronger than any previous allegiances. As winter approached, Anna realized that their victory had transformed more than just the ranch's future. It had created a template for fighting corruption, one that balanced justice with mercy, strength with wisdom. The unlikely family they'd formed, gunslingers, healers, telegraph operators, and ranchers, proved that the frontier's greatest power lay not in weapons or wealth, but in the bonds between those who chose to stand together against tyranny. The water continued flowing, as it had for centuries before any of them arrived. But now it nourished more than just the land. It sustained a community built on trust, justice, and the understanding that some things were worth fighting for, not just with guns, but with unwavering conviction in the power of right over might. Anna Mitchell stood at her ranch house window, watching the rising sun paint the plains in amber hues. The past weeks had been a brutal chess match against Alexander Turner, her late husband's duplicitous business partner, but today would end it all. Her hired guns, Ethan Roberts, Benjamin Perez, and the Phillips brothers Jacob and Noah, had discovered irrefutable evidence of Turner's corruption of the local law enforcement in Prescott. The proof was devastating. Ledgers showing bribes paid to deputies, contracts proving Turner's ownership of supposedly independent freight companies used for cattle rustling, and sworn testimonies from ranch hands he'd hired to steal Anna's cattle. Most damning was a letter in Turner's own hand outlining his scheme to force Anna into marriage by destroying her livelihood, thereby gaining control of the valuable water rights that made the Mitchell Ranch the most prosperous in the territory. Frances Turner, Alexander's estranged sister, and now Anna's closest confidant, had been instrumental in gathering the evidence. The proper society lady had shocked everyone by revealing her own investigative talents, meticulously documenting her brother's criminal enterprise while maintaining her place in Prescott's social circles. Her friendship had given Anna strength through the darkest days of widowhood and Turner's escalating pressure. Helen Roberts, the sharp-tongued telegraph operator who'd intercepted Turner's coded messages to his corrupt deputies, sat at Anna's kitchen table reviewing their plan one final time. "The federal marshal arrives on the morning train," she said, tapping a stack of telegrams. "Turner doesn't know we've contacted him. He thinks he's meeting you at noon to discuss his marriage proposal." Clara Phillips, Jacob's wife and the town's schoolteacher, had been quietly gathering support among Prescott's influential women. Many had lost husbands or sons to Turner's schemes over the years. Now they stood ready to testify about threats, extortion, and suspicious accidents that had forced them to sell their land at a fraction of its worth to Turner's shell companies. The sound of approaching horses drew Anna to the porch. Her hired guns rode in from their night patrol, dust-covered but alert. Ethan Roberts, their leader, dismounted with fluid grace that belied his trail-worn appearance. "Turner's men are moving into position around town, just like we expected. They think they're here to intimidate you into accepting his proposal." Benjamin Perez, whose family had worked the Mitchell Ranch for 3 generations, stepped forward with a leather portfolio. "The last pieces arrived from Globe last night. Bank records showing Turner's been laundering money through the territorial bank. The federal marshal will have everything he needs to make the charges stick." The Phillips brothers exchanged knowing looks as they secured their horses. They'd lost their own small ranch to Turner's machinations years ago, making this fight personal. "His men are loyal to money, not him," Jacob said. "Once they see which way the wind's blowing, they'll turn on him fast enough." By mid-morning, Prescott streets were unusually busy as Turner's men took up their positions, thinking they were there to ensure Anna's cooperation. They didn't notice the federal marshals quietly filtering in, taking strategic positions of their own. The trap was set with precision worthy of Turner himself. Alexander Turner arrived at precisely noon, immaculately dressed and wearing his most charming smile. He found Anna waiting in the sheriff's office exactly as arranged. His smile faltered slightly when he saw Frances sitting beside her, but he recovered quickly. "Ladies, I trust we can conduct this business civilized-like." "Indeed we can, brother," Frances replied, her voice arctic. "We have quite a lot of business to discuss." At her words, the federal marshal stepped from the back office, followed by a dozen deputies. The look of utter shock on Turner's face as he realized his own sister had helped orchestrate his downfall was something Anna would remember for the rest of her life. The arrest of Alexander Turner and his corrupt network sent shockwaves through the territory. Over the following weeks, more victims came forward with stories of intimidation and theft. The evidence Frances had gathered exposed decades of systematic corruption reaching into every level of local government. Several deputies and judges found themselves sharing cells with the man they'd protected for so long. Anna's ranch flourished in the aftermath, becoming a symbol of resistance against corruption. The water rights that Turner had coveted now supplied not just her cattle but helped sustain smaller farms throughout the region through fair contracts and shared access. The hired guns who'd helped save her ranch became permanent fixtures, with Ethan Roberts eventually becoming her foreman, and more. Frances Turner used her brother's conviction to launch a crusade for reform in territorial law enforcement, working alongside Helen Roberts to establish new systems for monitoring official communications and preventing future corruption. Clara Phillips expanded her school to include training for women in business and land management, ensuring no widow would ever again be as vulnerable as Turner had believed Anna to be. The story of how a diverse group of individuals had brought down one of the territory's most powerful men became legend, told and retold in saloons and around campfires. But for Anna, the most important lesson wasn't about justice or revenge. It was about the family you choose and the strength found in unlikely alliances. As she watched the sun set over her ranch, she knew she'd never again face any challenge alone. As the years passed, Anna's ranch flourished under the joint leadership she shared with Ethan. The sprawling operation became a model for other ranches in the territory, with innovative water management systems and grazing rotation methods that kept the grasslands healthy. Their success attracted aspiring ranchers from as far as Globe and Yuma, eager to learn from what many now called the Roberts method, though Anna insisted on keeping her maiden name for business purposes. Helen's law enforcement reforms spread beyond Prescott, creating a network of accountability that stretched across the territory. She and Francis worked tirelessly to establish a system of civilian oversight boards, ensuring that no sheriff or marshal could accumulate the kind of unchecked power that had allowed the previous corruption to flourish. Their efforts caught the attention of territorial legislators who began implementing similar measures throughout Arizona. Clara's School for Business-Minded Women grew into an institution that rivaled many Eastern colleges. She particularly focused on teaching land law and water rights, subjects that had once been used to manipulate vulnerable ranch owners. Among her most dedicated students was Alice Turner, Francis's daughter, who showed a natural aptitude for both business and justice, much like her aunt and mother. The original group of gunfighters who had helped save Anna's ranch settled into various roles throughout the territory. Benjamin became Globe's new marshal, implementing Helen's reforms with unwavering dedication. Jacob established a horse breeding operation near Flagstaff, supplying Anna's ranch with some of the finest stock in the territory. Noah, though still preferring to work alone, made regular stops at the ranch, always welcomed his family. 10 years after Turner's defeat, Anna hosted a gathering that brought together all those who had stood with her during that pivotal time. The celebration marked more than just their victory. It commemorated the transformation of the territory itself. As they sat around the evening fire, sharing memories and plans for the future, Anna realized how far they'd all come from those desperate days when she'd first sought help. The ranch house, once a symbol of her isolation, had become a hub of community activity. Regular gatherings brought together ranchers, lawmen, and businesswomen, all working to build something larger than themselves. The water rights that Turner had once coveted now served as the foundation for a cooperative system that benefited everyone in the region. Managed through a council that Anna helped establish, Ethan and Anna's partnership deepened over the years, their shared vision for the ranch expanding to include programs for training young ranchers, especially women who wanted to enter the business. Their marriage, when it finally happened, was a quiet affair attended by their chosen family, a stark contrast to the social spectacle of Anna's first wedding. This time, she walked toward her future with clear eyes and a full heart. Francis's reform work eventually took her to Washington, where she advocated for stronger protections for landowners throughout the Western territories. Her experiences in Arizona became a powerful testament to the need for change, and her presence in the Capitol ensured that the voices of Western women would no longer go unheard in the halls of power. As Anna watched a new generation of ranchers and reformers emerge, she often reflected on the legacy they were building. The territory was changing rapidly, with railroads and telegraphs bringing the outside world ever closer. Yet the principles they'd fought for, justice, cooperation, and the right of every person to forge their own path, remained constant. The legend of their stand against corruption had evolved into something more, a blueprint for a different kind of West. On cool evenings, Anna still stood on her porch watching the sunset over the plains, but now she was rarely alone. The sound of laughter and conversation often drifted from the main house, where friends and family gathered regularly. The cattle still grazed on the distant hills, their soft lowing carried on the wind, but they were no longer just symbols of wealth. They represented a vision of prosperity shared by an entire community, built on the foundation of trust and mutual support that had emerged from their darkest hours.